What we are talking about today is the rework of Havoc Demon Hunter. We mostly skipped the Havoc changes when we talked about the balance tuning of a few days ago to have a more in-depth look to this larger set of changes for the spec. Now, the change itself is quite interesting because it comes at a moment where Havoc is, how should we put it? Not doing too well, right? This entire expansion, if we start, for example, from the raid, we are in this not too familiar position where Havoc is quite in a bad situation. Even if we go backwards towards the start of the season, Havoc wasn't doing that well. Of course, as usual, Havoc remains one of the more popular specs overall, but still, the performance itself is kind of poor. Even if we go into Mythic Plus, we see that Havoc is not really doing that well. Even if we exclude the trio of Exodia range specs and we just look at the melee, Havoc is still falling behind quite a few of the other melee specs. So even talking about just the performance right now, Havoc has not been doing too well. So what we have now to check the changes, we have the default raid single target build of Havoc Demon Hunter, we have the Mythic Plus build right now of Havoc Demon Hunter, and then the incoming changes in Season 3 to the talents of Havoc Demon Hunter. So we are starting with the first major change, which is the one to Fodder to the Flame. TLDR, now Fodder to the Flame is automatically activated by using Spectral Sight. And for that, Spectral Sight will now have a 90-second cooldown. Yes, adventurers in the open world who were using Spectral Sight to find treasures are now in shambles at this one having a 90-second cooldown. Anyways, now this cooldown is activated by Spectral Sight. The mobs, of course, instantly dies by being hit, and more importantly, you now instantly and automatically gain the buff of defeating the demon without having to collect the soul. Now it's instant. So Fodder to the Flame is turned into essentially an on-use 90-second cooldown. Some players don't like this, they perhaps even enjoyed the RNG element or the fact that it was proccing more often without you having control over the proc. Others are much more happy. They are happy because now they can tie and time this 20% damage increase for 15 seconds with other cooldowns. Now, if they are using the Hunt, if they are using Fel Barrage, if they are using Metamorphosis, now they can decide to use Fodder to the Flame and gain this damage buff, which is overall, for the more competitive side of things, a better change for Havoc Demon Hunter. Talking about better changes now, Metamorphosis lasts for 20 seconds instead of 24, but it has a shorter cooldown, 3 minutes. And of course, everyone will be using the 60-second cooldown reduction of Meta, which effectively makes Meta a 2-minute cooldown. This is also very good. Yes, it does make it kind of frustrating for you because you have a 90-second cooldown here, you have a 90-second cooldown here, your Fodder to the Flame now has a 90-second cooldown, so basically nothing lines up with a 2-minute meta. What matters though is that the rest of the game lines up with your 2-minute cooldowns, because all of the other specs, many of the more powerful specs, most of the more powerful specs will have their damage windows centered around 2-minute cooldowns. So you being able to have a similar damage window with meta is going to be quite relevant for both Mythic Plus, where mega pools in Mythic Plus of trash mobs are centered around big 2-minute cooldowns, as well as certain raid phases centered around cooldowns. Now it will make it easier for you as a Demon Hunter with a shorter cooldown of your Metamorphosis. Now, talking about more quality of life changes, we have Demonic Appetite for your chance of gaining extra Fury baseline, and Fel Eruption, your single target stun, is now baseline. Yes, as a drawback, Demonic Appetite now generates 20 Fury instead of 30, but what matters is that the talent point you were spending for Demonic Appetite is now gone. Now Demonic Appetite is baseline, so that's a good change. What's also good is your single target stun being baseline, because basically Demon Hunters were just ignoring it right now. What really hurt the talent 3 of Havoc Demon Hunter was the fact that in the first bracket, in the first 8 points of your talents, you had too many things you wanted to take. So you ended up having to miss out on some very important things for yourself. For example, your defensive talents, in particular, your immunity, Netherwalk. Now, with Fell Eruption being made baseline and Demonic Appetite being made baseline, you have a much higher chance of finally being able to pick this immunity again. Of course, we still don't know what's replacing those talents, so maybe Blizzard comes up with 2 more must-have talents over here, and you go back to the problem of having to miss out on Netherwalk. But Blizzard thought about that too, because previously Netherwalk was in the middle and completely skippable if you wanted to go forward. Now you can't. Now you must take Netherwalk anyways if you want to go down basically the rest of your talent tree, either this or Desperate Instinct. So it is also a good change to push more Demon Hunters for a more powerful defensive ability in Netherwalk. Now, a couple of minor changes like Glaive Tempest having a 25-second cooldown instead of 20, but in return doing more damage and having a larger set of targets hittable before it hits diminishing returns. That's good. Major change which got many Demon Hunters thinking they were now the Fell version of a Breath of Sindragosa Frost Death Knight, which is the change to Fell Barrage. Now Fell Barrage is no longer channeled, instead it's gonna drain Fury per tick and will last forever until Fury is depleted. Now this at the moment, while this looks exciting, it's terrible because Fell Barrage is doing no damage, basically. The attack power multiplier only being 26% per tick is just far too little. If you consider it consumes 15 Fury per tick, the entire duration baseline, it's as if you were using 1 Death Sweep and 4 Annihilation casts. And the Fell Barrage right now is doing the equivalent of less than half of that damage, and this is supposed to be a 90-second cooldown. So while the idea is cool, especially for some even extra AoE cooldowns, the damage itself right now is just too weak to be worthwhile. So it will be for sure tuned as we go deeper down the PTR. Now, quality of life change to initiative. The effect is no longer triggered or denied by damage over time effects, so especially for example in different and multiple Mythic Plus pools where you are trying to chain mobs but you still have some dots on you and whatnot, now you will still be gaining the 12% critical strike chance, which is a cool extra quality of life change to Havoc. However, we are entering the more important of the changes. Momentum and the new talent. First of all, Momentum now gives you 6% more damage instead of 8, but lasts 6 seconds instead of 5. Additionally, the duration now stacks to a maximum of 30 seconds instead of 10, which means now you can queue up multiple instances of momentum generating abilities like Fell Rush or Vengeful Retreat and stack them up together beyond 10 seconds, which is quite a helpful quality of life change. However, what could possibly be even bigger is the fact that Blizzard thought of an alternative. Now, Inertia will be a dual choice node talent with momentum. Inertia makes it so that when you get empowered by Unbound Chaos, Fell Rush increases the damage you deal by 20% for 5 seconds. So essentially, it's over than triple the damage of momentum, but it happens less often. The position remains the same. Here is Inertia right now with momentum, and here is your current live talent with momentum. The major change is, of course, that now this works with Unbound Chaos, meaning that it works by activating Immolation Aura. The more you activate Immolation Aura, the more you gain Unbound Chaos, the more you can proc Inertia. But of course, the cooldown of Immolation Aura is longer than being able to use, for example, multiple Fell Rush charges to benefit from momentum. This, however, can be further enhanced by a new talent, a Fire Inside. Immolation Aura now has 1 additional charge and a 30% chance to refund a charge when activated. On top of that, you can have multiple Immolation Auras active. Now, suddenly, this changes the impact of this Inertia talent, because now Unbound Chaos can proc way more often thanks to this talent. Now you have 2 charges of Immolation Aura instead of 1, and on top of that you also have a chance to not consume the charges, which means the amount of times you will be able to Immolation Aura gain Unbound Chaos, use Fel Rush and gain Inertia becomes much higher. Now, granted, what you might notice is that the two talents are kind of counterintuitive, because Immolation Aura does more damage when it's at the end of its duration, thanks to Growing Inferno, which gives you more damage every tick, and the Ragefire talent, which makes Immolation Aura blow up at the end for even more damage. You would like to want, normally, this damage increase at the end of Immolation Aura, because after all, a Havoc Demon Hunter does a large portion of its AoE damage with these two features. If you put them together as part of the same thing, they are basically the highest damage you do in Mythic Plus. And this is somewhat counterintuitive, because this 20% damage increase only happens after you have used Immolation Aura. So after you are basically only a few ticks inside of Growing Inferno, doing little damage with Immolation Aura, and far away from Ragefire. Your best guess would be to activate Immolation Aura, but sit on Unbound Chaos. Unbound Chaos lasts for up to 12 seconds, so basically you wait and wait and wait before you use Fel Rush for almost 12 seconds, and then you use Fel Rush to gain Inertia, giving you 20% more damage. But since 12 seconds have passed, the damage of Immolation Aura kept increasing, and if you have delayed it far enough, you might even get the explosion of Ragefire inside this damage boost. But, you know, it looks a little bit contrived, it looks a little bit counterintuitive in the way this is working with this new talent. What's certain though is that it definitely might give players finally an alternative, at least, to play with momentum. As we know, we do have quite a decent number of Havoc Demon Hunters not too happy having to constantly waltz around / kill themselves by trying to keep momentum active. With Inertia, you might be given an option to go for fewer amounts of zigzagging around and instead gain a bonus just with one Fel Rush powered by Immolation Aura, which is an overall smoother playstyle than the current momentum build. Even though, as we mentioned, the new quality of life extending the max duration of momentum is also a pretty good change to the quality of life of playing with the momentum build. We can finish with both a good and a bad. The good part at the end is basically all of this. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different talents now costing 1 point instead of 2. Yes, now the 1 point only is going to be weaker than if you were spending 2. The talents themselves are made weaker, but you now spend 6 fewer talent points. So this means that when you compare the current version to the old version, you now have 4 more talent points to spend. That's because Blizzard added a couple more by the end, but this means that comparing the two, which is even visible by the ones that are colored, you just have more talent options in 10.2 to choose from, because you simply have to spend fewer amount of 2 talent points and then 2 talent points compared to now, where you only have to spend 1. So that's the good of the talent 3. The bad part, or maybe just the confusing part, is the push of Blizzard to go towards throw glaives. Even down here, for example, you have the Throw Glaive talent, followed by another Throw Glaive talent, which, even more confusingly, is gating your Immolation Aura synergy. So, if you wanted to make your Immolation line, you have to pass through 2 points of Soul Rend to buff your Throw Glaive. And on top of that, of course, you have the tier set. A tier set entirely around using Throw Glaive. So basically, even if you didn't want to use Throw Glaive, it's not that you had an option. You will have to play around Throw Glaive in 10.2. The weird part, of course, is that as of right now, even if you go, as in this test, towards Throw Glaive empowering talents, you are somewhere in the realm of 15 to 20% behind in damage compared to your current standard builds in live. So at the moment in 10.2, the Throw Glaive talents, and even including the tier set, are quite underpowered in terms of sheer numbers compared to your live version. So that's the thing. even if Blizzard is trying to focus more towards this throw Glaive build, they will have to tweak and tune quite a few numbers before it becomes a competitive alternative in 10.2. And we can assume it will have to become a competitive alternative given that the entire tier set revolves around using throw Glaives. So that's the other point around these changes to the talent tree of Havoc. Still, if we assume it will be somewhat decently tuned by the time we get to 10.2 release, most of the changes are quite nice. You now have more utility, you have a baseline single target stun, you will have much more easily now an immunity again as a Havoc Demon Hunter. You now also have a more legitimate option to opt out from playing momentum and play a different style, so you do have a decent amount of changes and improvements to the talent tree. We will continue, of course, to monitor the changes of the talent tree as we keep going in the PTR. After all, we still have basically even missing talents from the talent tree, so more changes will be planned for Havoc, but that's what we have for now as far as the first round of changes for this Havoc rework are concerned. So you can let me guys know, of course, down in the comments what have been your thoughts, your first impressions about this Havoc rework for 10.2. In the meantime, I'm going to leave you to the rest of your weekend. We are starting our goodbyes by thanking all of our Patreon supporters for the contribution and help to the growth of the channel, and of course help that can still be given completely for free. You can like and comment down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, well, we are almost there. 22 degrees, it's getting almost cold enough, it's reaching my ideal point of weather.